Transition Radio TV brought to you by thebreastformstore.com. They have everything you could possibly need for your cross-dressing and transgender needs. Visit their website at www.thebreastformstore.com and tell them Transition Radio sent you.
Ingredients include a look behind the scenes. Cook uncovered until hot. Add grooves to taste.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl.
The accident was over a year ago. A second woman has been elected president. A 12th planet has been named in the solar system. The last wild polar bear has died. I slept through it all. I was here for my waking. He called it a beginning. He said it was good. I think he may have thought that anything I did was good.
Welcome to Transition Radio with your host, Mark Angelo Cummings.
And your hostess, Jessica Lynn Cummings.
Well, hello, and good evening, and welcome to Transition Radio TV. We are live from Silver City, New Mexico.
How'd that go again?
Silver City, New Mexico. I'm getting feedback on my ear as I was talking. I'm going, God, why is it doing that? But it stopped now, thank God. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And tonight we have such a very special guest. Tonight we have Cathy Brennan, who is a longtime lesbian activist in Baltimore, Maryland. Cathy has been involved in numerous legislative campaigns, most notably the Anti-Discrimination Act of 2002, which banned discrimination based on sexual orientation in employment, housing, and public accommodations.
Cathy also actively lobbied in support of Maryland's HB 235, which is House Bill 235, in 2011, which would have banned discrimination based on gender identity in employment and housing. Cathy currently focuses her advocacy on the eradication of gender stereotypes, the promotion of radical feminism, the defense of women-only space, and the fight against male violence against women and children.
Gender fluidity, except that I don't actually have any gender fluidity. Oh my God, my hair looks so bad. Oh, I was just a woman when I did that, because that's what women do. Anyway, so we've all seen these pretentious videos on YouTube and elsewhere where young men and not so young men proclaim that they are female because they adopt stereotypical mannerisms associated by misogynists with how women behave. I think this proves nothing except that, one, these men are narcissists desperate for attention, and two, gender identity, genderqueer, transgender is rooted in stereotypes in and of itself, and it's not a strategy for liberation, it's not liberatory for women, and it's not representative of anything that connects with the lives of actual women. What it does is allow men to express themselves in ways and to adopt oppressive stereotypes for their own pleasure. And that's all it's about. It's their own pleasure. And I know that makes some transgender women very sad to hear that we think what they view as an innate identity is nothing but a fetish, but it's nothing but a fetish, and you are all men. I'm very sorry. I know I'm speaking in a calm, rational tone right now, which probably makes me a woman, but a man rather, but I can assure you I'm not a man. Sorry. I mean, I could be, though, because look at this weather. I mean, should a woman really be driving in this weather? It's like so dangerous outside, and I'm like a really bad driver. So, guys, I just don't know. Maybe someone can help me. I should call AAA for some assistance. And this is kind of girly, let's be honest. Enjoy the weather event.
And now, welcome to our show, Cathy Brennan. I've watched that video several times.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hilarious.
It's lovely to see you both.
Lovely to see you. And oh my god, I should have totally wore a dress.
You'd look much better in a dress than I would.
And I guess I better scratch something down there. It's crazy.
Stereotypes.
It's why does society do crazy things like this? You know, pink is for girls and blue is for boys, and we need to act a certain way. And it's just
Should we thank our parents for that?
probably
They pushed the blues and the pinks on us as babies.
maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like, where did it all start? You know, when did this whole craziness start? I don't know. Let's blame it on the water. And
Where do we start with the discussion of where the craziness started?
Must be something they were
don't
drinking in the water. They've been putting stuff in the water for the longest time. Screw us all up.
I mean, look at the 80s. The 80s was very ungender fluid and non-stereotypical. The 80s was a great era, I think. I'm an 80s baby. I love the 80s. 80s music, hair bands, the whole 9 yards. So, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I think that was a good year.
So, Cathy, tell us about your greatest achievement and what are you most proud of?
My greatest achievement?
Yeah.
You mean politically?
Anything. You could name several. It doesn't just have to be one.
Yeah.
Things that
Well,
you're most
you
proud of.
know, in the political realm, I'm probably less interested in talking about achievements and more interested in talking about just the evolution of gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans rights as a movement over the last couple of decades. And I'm in my 40s now. I came out when I was 19, so I've been an adult for a lot of this time period, and a lot has changed, and some of it has been for the better. I mean, obviously, gay people, lesbian people, gender nonconforming people, trans people are more present and out and open than ever, and that's a good thing. Diversity and diversity of opinion and diversity of expression is a good thing. It's a positive thing. But we're starting to see, in my view, and there's a lot of people obviously who don't agree with me, some drawbacks to that. And one of the huge drawbacks that we've had in this march towards visibility and a march towards equality is a real sense and a real loss of what it means to be different. And, there's this drive in the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community, particularly with regard to thought, that we are all supposed to march to this one ideology and have this, same belief. And there are many of us in the community who are like, wait a second, some of the things that are happening in our community are not things that we think are good. We don't think they're good for gay people. I certainly don't think a lot of the things are good for women specifically. So let's have a conversation. And we're not able to do that. So to bring back to your question of like an achievement I'm proud of, I'm pretty proud of the fact that people are now publicly having the conversation around transgender and how it negatively impacts women specifically, and how it specifically negatively impacts lesbians. And, I'd like to think I played a little bit of a role in that, given all the death threats and rape threats I get. I would like to think they were, not for nothing. So I'm happy that this conversation has been unfolding over the last couple of years, and more people are now becoming aware of, underneath the shiny surface of like everyone is fighting for equality is this real battle about what equality looks like.
Exactly. And the whole thing. Oh God, I'm having a blah moment. Hang on. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me go ahead.
I'll come back to it.
It's important that these conversations are put forth and people are open. They come to these conversations with an open heart, not with ego, because that's what's happening. There's a lot of ego-based, emotion-based conversations that lead to death threat, that lead to people, oh, you're contributing. I've been told that I'm contributing to death of trans women by saying what I'm saying and all this stuff. And I'm like, where do you people get all this? How do you even put these puzzle pieces together to say what you're saying? Open up your hearts and mind and realize that, okay, these are important conversations. You claim to be a female, yet you're not even understanding someone who was born female thinks and feels.
Well, I hate to say it. You can't sit there and tell me that I have not seen one trans girl out there that can tell you what it is to be a woman. And what it truly is to be a woman. It's, dresses. It's the stereotypical BS. And that's what a lot of the feminists fight against, because they have been fighting for equal rights for women alone to be the equivalent to male and salary and, everything, just being able to do everything that a man could do. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of women out there that could do things a hell of a lot better than some men can. So, but none of these trans girls can tell you what it really is to be a woman. And, you can ask 90 of them, and 90 of them are going to give you a different answer, and none of them are going to be what it truly is.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really true. And to take it back a step, there really is a tension here between, there's a couple of tension points in the GLBT community. One is you have gay men, bisexual men, and transgender women who are born biologically male. So you have like males, and then you have bisexual women, lesbians, and trans men who are born biologically female. So you have like the male-female split. So to the extent that one recognizes that males are born into our culture in an I don't want to, I will, like, as an oppressor class to females who are born into an oppressed class. And I recognize a lot of people reject that, but like, the basis of radical feminism is misogyny and hatred of women, and oppression of women is the root. So everything that I do, or everything I try to do, is in recognition of that reality. And so then here you have the GLBT community, which is like, la, 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 like it's a whole different theory of oppression. Like the theory of oppression is the oppression emanates from one's nonconformity with set stereotypes about men and women. So this is how you're able to get this idea that trans women are oppressed by women because we are cisgender. And this is a huge tension point because, anyone who actually wants to look at this subject in an objective way, which I've yet to meet, maybe I've met maybe like 5 people in the GLBT community who are actually willing to engage with this subject matter objectively. The history of women's oppression is overwhelming. The statistics are staggering. The level of violence that is experienced against women, the number of women who've experienced sexual violence, both as girls and as adults. And it's perpetrated by men overwhelmingly. So you have this backdrop of it is not a level playing field. And then as gay people or as queer people or gender, however we want to call ourselves, coming into this community, like the rules are just changed. So you have, this disconnect between what we know to be true from, both, observing facts and, data that exists about violence against women, and also the lived experience that we have as girls. And we're basically told none of that matters in the gay community. And that's a problem because it actually does matter. And women in the gay community, particularly lesbians, have been asked to really just sign off on a lot of the transgender agenda and to wave goodbye to the stuff that actually impacts us specifically because we're female. And the worst example of this, I would say, is the idea that lesbians owe, an obligation to transgender women to date them. And this is really like the canary in the coal mine moment, right? So it's like, if you can get a lesbian to date you and you're a trans woman, that must mean you're a real woman. This is what I've heard said, and I've seen this written any number of ways. And quite honestly, that is nothing more than rape culture. It's nothing more than perpetuating the idea that women owe males access to our bodies sexually. And it's not revolutionary, I know that's hard for people to take because they want to pretend, that biology isn't a thing. But at the end of the day, biology is a thing. It exists.
Exactly.
So the other piece of that is there is this misconception that acknowledging that biology exists means that radical feminists or lesbian feminists say, well, that means you have to act a certain way. That's complete bullshit. And it's demonstrably false, because most of the women who are, advocating the very unpopular position I advocate are dykes. We're dykes. We're dykes. We've been gender nonconforming for a really long time. We engage in sexual relations with women, which is not what we're supposed to be doing. So that line of argument just doesn't pass the smell test. And it's just, can we get an honest conversation about what is happening in our umbrella community? I would be grateful for that, for a change, because quite honestly, I am sick to fucking death of talking about this issue. I am sick of it. And I'm sure people are sick of me.
Join the club. I mean, there's so many trans people out there that are today, not back in the day, but from today, that are actually out there, and they're preaching gender fluidity, that I'm gender fluid, but yet they tell the whole world they're trans in front of a video camera, and they're preaching nonconformity, but yet they want the whole world to see them as gender fluid. And biologically, that's impossible. Surgically, chemically, yes, they can alter us to make us feel how we feel inside, but it's still not biologically. Sorry, I've never seen a girl born with a penis.
Yeah.
So you're a trans woman. Yeah. I've never seen a man born with a vagina, so you're a trans man, unless the rare case of you're intersex and have ambiguous genitalia.
Right. And the thing that is so disturbing, getting back to what has happened to our movement with this march towards conformity, it's very important for us to get gay marriage, and I supported gay marriage, but it's a conformist agenda. Getting gays in the military is a conformist agenda. Passing hate crimes legislation is a conformist pro-incarceration agenda. So, I'm not in favor of any of these things. I think it's a conformist type of agenda. And I think when we sign off on that and we're like, oh, well, trans women are just they're actually women, and that's what being a woman means, it takes away the power of being, a male who is transgressing sex stereotypes. I think it's disempowering to do that. And, I reject that as a lesbian. I reject this idea oh, well, you're a lesbian and you're just like us. I'm no, I'm not. No, we're not. And that's actually okay. And it's preferable to me, and to many of us. We specifically, many of us are gay because we don't want to be like you.
Exactly, and it's we're being pushed to be normal, to follow the exact rules of society.
To be normal, exactly.
Let's get married like everybody else. Let's do this like everybody else.
Let's get involved.
And it takes away from our queerness. Yeah, marriage. What is marriage? A contract between you, the person you're with, and the state. It's I don't need the state to dwell in my affairs. And so here, it's we're all, it's like sheeples trying to follow, trying to fit in, because, okay, all our lives we felt like an outcast. So now it's like, I want to be part of the good old boys club, or I want to be part of the popular gang. And it's like, no, be yourself, be proud of who you are.
Exactly.
Right. And it's not to say, obviously, like, there are important legal rights that come with marriage, and I support, like, the legal rights that come with marriage. And it's also not to knock the work that gay rights activists have done around marriage. Like, it's hugely impressive. But as far as, like, the gay culture and our movement, those types of policy decisions and what we decide to prioritize has an impact on how we are as a gay culture. And I think what you're seeing with the gender identity issue in particular is a real, like, fracturing moment where you have women in the gay community who, let's be honest, like, we have been, like, the hard workers of the gay community, and, like, we have labored and done, like, tons of shit for the gay community, going back into the 80s, like, when lesbians stood by their dying gay brothers and, like, supported them and held them. Like, you're really seeing now a moment where lesbians are like, well, what does this mean? And it was one thing back in the 90s when it was like, your trans woman friend in the Lesbian Avengers who, like, was, like, queer. Like, they were actually, like, socialized as gay. Some of them were socialized as gay men and grew up, like, queer in the queer community. What we have now is, like, a big influx of heterosexuals into our movement who don't have the same, like, values, at least in my experience, of, like, queerness or, like, gayness. And they're really setting the agenda. So, like, as lesbians, looking at the gender identity stuff, like, it's a little bit disconcerting. If anyone actually bothers to read the legislation that the NGLTF and HRC are pushing with regard to gender identity, it's ridiculous. And it affirms this idea that there are ways of being male or female or that go along with your biological sex. So it's really affirming that stereotypes are innate. I don't think stereotypes are innate. If I thought stereotypes were innate, I wouldn't be a feminist. And I sure wouldn't be a dyke. Like, like, what would I would be something else. So I don't know what we're doing as a community. Like, it's really on autopilot. And when you challenge it at all, you get huge negative and violent backlash. And this is why people don't talk.
Exactly. And you mentioned, and you were just talking about that a little bit in one of your videos, that transgender individuals in the 90s are so very different from the new wave of trans now. Can you elaborate a little more? You were kind of touching on that. So let's go further into that.
So my impression, there's a couple of aspects to this. And one is, I think it's misleading, for the GLBT community to talk about us as if we're a community, because we're really not. We're several different communities. But I also think that's true with the transgender community specifically. So because you have heterosexual males who decide that they are lesbians, they're a very different group than homosexual males who then decide that they are women. Those are two different groups, and how, in my experience, they react to pushback from lesbians. So the harassment and the violent death threats come predominantly from the heterosexual males who now identify as lesbians. And as it turns out, that's the group that is setting the agenda, because heterosexual white males, if we're going to talk about, intersections of, privilege and race and sex and class, like, they got the dough, right? So, like, they got the dough, they can set the agenda, and they are doing that. And so you have, I don't want to name individual people, but, like, if you go to my blog, or if you go to Gender Trender is another good source for this, there are, these guys who are heterosexual guys, and they decide they're lesbians, and they're out there and they're like, yelling and screaming, and like they get like thousands of followers on social media, and that's what's happening. And then you have younger people, like much younger people, who, you know, thank God the internet didn't exist when I was a teenager, because I probably right now would be a demisexual, polyromantic otherkin, like, you know, like whatever the fuck is the thing now.
It's the
You know,
keyboard
and so like
warriors.
those kids are out there and they're like eating this shit up because it makes them feel special,
Yeah.
and it makes them they want to feel special. And you know, I get that everyone wants to feel special, but the reality is that nobody's special. None of us are
Exactly.
special. You are special to each other, you're special to your loved ones. I'm very special to my girlfriend, but like, no, none of, you know, there's only one Beyonce, okay? Like,
As a
That's-
group, you're not special. Yes, as a group, there can be many different unique individuals within that
yeah,
group.
but who, you know, really, but who gives a shit? Like, what
I
is
know.
a movement that's premised on this idea, like, we all share in this delusion? Like, and this is true also of the gay movement. Like, lesbians don't have a whole lot in common with gay men. Like, what do we have in common? Like, we both like to fuck the same members of the same sex. That's it. I mean, really, like that's the premise of our movement, and that's why we should ally with gay men. And I'm like, look, there are a lot of things in the gay male community. Lots of lesbians don't have, you know, we don't like. we don't like it. So why are we doing that?
Yeah, we're entitled. I mean, like you said, the new wave, we call them the keyboard warriors.
Yeah.
They just,
Oh,
you know,
that's a
it's all
good-
about
that's
me,
a
me,
good
me.
description.
I need this and I want that. And you need to see me like this and you better, or else you're with us or against us. And it's just battle, battle, battle. And all they've done is like destroyed everything. I want to talk
Stop
a little
using
bit.
this word, that word.
I want to talk a
Left
little
out.
bit about TERF.
About what?
There's TERF, TERF, TERF.
Oh, right. Okay.
I know that this has been a major issue with a lot of the lesbian identified trans women, and they're like having major issues and battles with it. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
So you know, I'm probably not the best person to discuss the TERF, but this is my impression of it. I think it's important for people watching this to know that I don't pay attention to 99% of the things that people tweet at me, or like say to me on Facebook. Or I do have a secret Twitter account. I'm going to come out and say that. And I'm not supposed to because I'm very bad and I'm banned from Twitter, but fuck you. So, but and it's not Gender Identity Watch, where I actually don't tweet. So TERF apparently was coined by some women, like in 2008, to separate themselves from the mean radical feminists. But, you know, clearly the person who coined it is not a radical feminist, because the very, you know, basis of radical feminism is misogyny is the root of women's oppression, and gender is the mechanism of that oppression. So gender is like, you know, I've written about this before. Like, it's like the chick sorting machine, where like the chicks are born and the male chicks are sorted from the female chicks. That's gender. So you're put in your little, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're supposed to do. And that decision is made based on your biological sex. And that's bullshit. Like, that should not happen. That's total bullshit, and it's wrong. And the only reason that it exists is to support male power. So if you don't understand that, you can't even bother to call yourself a radical feminist. So these women who came up with TERF, they misapprehended like that piece of it. And the reason they did that is because I'm sure they had some nice trans women friends that they didn't want to hurt their feelings, which is very much what women do. Like, we're socialized to be accommodating to men, even when they say they're women. Like, and I have done that. Like, I have trans women friends still, you know.
I'm one.
Yeah. Oh, you're so sweet. But, you know, but in reality, like, and, you know, it's very painful to say things that your friends, that will hurt your friends. Like, this doesn't bring me joy. Like, you know, I don't have, like, I don't relish going around and being like, hey, you're actually male. Like, you know, but, you know, there'd be no reason to do that if you didn't have such like massive boundary violations coming from trans women against women. So this is like the TERF, expression it basically means any woman who sets a boundary. Now, because I've seen it used against Lily Cade, who is a lesbian porn star, who is not a radical feminist. Like, she's a porn star. Like, she is pro-porn. That is not radical feminist. And that's no shade to her. Like, she's doing her thing. Do your thing. Like, whatever. But, like, that's how it's being used now is, Lily Cade set a boundary that she didn't want to do porn with male-bodied people or people who had, were born male. And now she's being called a TERF. So this really demonstrates to you what TERF actually means. It actually means woman who sets a boundary. And there's not ever any discussion in this about trans men because, I and many radical feminists, but I'm just going to speak for me, like, I've been you're TERF and you hate trans people and you don't accept trans men as men. I'm like, no, trans men are female. And like, if a trans man, like, wanted to come and caucus with women, that's fine with me because you're female, That's not saying I'm like going out saying like, you must identify as female. People should live their lives, like live your life. If everyone would live their life with like a little bit of respect for other people, we would all be better off, and like we could then find like the things we have in common that would enable us to support one another. Because as gender nonconforming people, we all have a significant interest in like combating homophobic violence,
Exactly.
or misogynistic violence, because we're all bashed because of that. Like we're all called out because we're not, manly enough or we're faggy or whatever. But we're not there right now. We're too busy fighting each other. And it's a waste of time.
It is. And, the whole thing is that, like, you were talking about FTMs, like in Mark's case, I notice since we've been on this journey, we've been in a couple of LGBT campgrounds. And I noticed being around the guys, Mark's a little bit, uncomfortable, and you can sense it. But then they had a women's weekend where it was all women and lesbian women that came, and everybody had a great time. But I noticed he was more sociable with the women than he is with the men, and I'm the same way because of the simple fact that I was socialized as male my whole life growing up. I had to be a male. He was socialized as a female.
And I still have a lot of my female traits, and I will never let them go. I'm very proud of who I am. I'm very nurturing, very clean, enjoy little, how do I even say it? I'm very oriented to, what's the word I'm looking for now? I can't even think of it.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
You were socialized female, which means, in our patriarchal culture that you were, socialized to have traits that are stereotypically associated with being female, like being nurturing. So, and there's nothing wrong with any of that, like at all. Like, the thing that is missing from the GLBT community right now is honesty. Mm-hmm. And, let's be honest about who we are and what we need, and how we also need to learn to respect other people. So there is this, to me, this very alarming trend, which is not unique to the issue of gender identity. I think, I saw this with doing like gay rights organizing in the late 90s, early 2000s is, this emphasis on like, let's demonize religious people and let's make them a hate group. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong-headed, and I think as a strategy for liberation for gay people, like it's based in fear. And I don't actually think religious people are hateful. Like, I disagree with religious people. I've debated many religious people, but I think it's wrong to just flat out say, like, you're a hateful Nazi bigot, KKK. Like, it's not an argument. It's just a bullying tactic. And, if someone believes in God, who cares? Like, how does that impact your life? Go ahead and let them believe in God. And, like, even, for me, if someone believes in gender, good for you. Like, if you want to be transgender, good for you. Like, the tension comes when you demand that other people believe as you do. And there's a lot of that in the GLBT community. And I will never, ever, ever support that.
We wanted to share a video that you had on your blog that talks. It's one of the trans female who's went totally irate and I won this and I want Joe to go ahead.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because there is this sense that transgender women in particular feel like I'm at war with them, or I sit behind my computer and I'm like, how can I come up with ways to like, and it's just there's some like specific mental illness that comes with the internet, and that I think 20, 30 years from now we'll have a lot of data about. But I actually have a very full and rich life, and I'm not interested in any individual person. The only way any individual person comes across my desk is if they're involved in like a public news story or litigation, and then we track that, or two, they threaten me. Right. If you don't want to get on my radar, don't threaten me. Like, don't threaten to kill me, don't talk about my family, don't threaten to rape me, because if you do that, I am pretty good at finding out who people are.
And firing back.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Joe, go ahead and roll them.
Let's roll the video.
So, one of the people who admin the now defunct Gender Identity Watch Facebook page sent me this video, which apparently it might have been posted to the Twitter. It might have been, I don't know where the person got it from. But anyway, they sent it to me. So it's very dramatic and important. So I wanted to share it with you.
Hi, this is Nancy Evelyn Goldwick.
Let me first say that I love his hat and his purple tie. I think it's very cute. The glasses are very common among hipster dykes in their 20s. They're not typically two-tone like that, but they work for him, so that's fine. I'm sorry, let's continue.
Breaking news. Guess what, Cathy Brennan?
So this is a little creepy to have elderly men like speak to me like I've talked to them. I don't know who this person is. He apparently made an effort to get in touch with me. Here is he's sending a tweet, and he's very excited, and that's nice. I'm happy for him. But I don't know you, guy. Like, we're not actually in a war. I know you think we are, but we're not. So anyway, please continue.
Guess what, you other TERFs?
TERF is a slur that's used by men like Nancy to deny the ability of women to talk about our shared oppression based on our sex. So immediately, this guy in the purple hat and the purple tie is a men's rights activist. So now it'll sound like Peanut's voice to me in my head, but let's continue.
And you know what a TERF is? That's a transgender, exclusionary, radical feminist.
I wonder if this guy has ever read Gender Identity Watch, because there's a whole category of cases on this blog where we talk about employment discrimination litigation, and I guarantee you none of you have ever read this, because we generally support the claims that are brought by transgender people, because we believe no transgender person should be terminated for gender nonconformity. So, okay, I guess that makes us TERFs. That makes sense.
Gender Identity Watch on Facebook has been considered hate speech. You're down. You're toast. Enjoy your website, but on Facebook you are zip.
So this isn't at all like male celebrating in the end zone. Like, I didn't get the sense of all of like, you lose, you're vanquished, or like, to the victor go the spoils. Like, this is very much something that I see women doing regularly. I'm just kidding. This is very masculine behavior that he's exhibiting. Again, I think it's important for trans women to realize women already know that we're fucked. Like, we already know we've lost. We've been women our whole lives. Like, do you think that this is, like, something that ruins my day? Like, do you think I'm in my evil lair like you? Like, drats! Foiled again. No. I'm a woman. I already know the answer to pretty much all of the questions. And the answer is always women lose. So I'm surprised that the page stayed up as long as it did, honestly. Anyway, please continue with your end zone celebration, sir.
Nil, nada, non-existent. We won, you lost.
Yes, Mr. Gold. Women always lose. That's the problem.
You hate, we don't.
So this is another thing that I see trans activists do a lot, is this appeal to authority. So basically, he is substituting his own judgment for that of, you know, the automated team at Facebook for what constitutes hate speech and how to game the system. If you want to have that much faith in a corporation as to what's hate speech, that's great. Good for you. If you think that it's hate speech to know that this is a man, then that's your right. It's certainly Facebook's decision. It's a private platform and they can do what they like. Does that mean there's some objective standard of what constitutes hate speech? I would love to see that. I think that that would be an important discussion to have.
Congratulations to everyone who worked their ass off on the petitions on chance, on
chance. I think you mean change.
Constantly pummeling Facebook to make this happen.
See, this is what trans activists do. Instead of creating spaces where folks can have conversations and feel, you know, do whatever they need to do, they prioritize taking out radical feminist venues, conferences, Facebook pages. They're no different than men's rights activists in this regard. We as women are actually allowed to have conversations that don't center people like Nancy. We as women are actually allowed to have conversations about women and how we think we should work to achieve women's liberation. So, Nancy, I'm glad that you spent all that time to get a Facebook page taken down, and I'm happy for you that you have this victory because it seems to matter to you. But you'll always be male, and that's not changing. You can attempt to pummel people into submission. You can attempt to intimidate women. You can try to make women feel shame for knowing that you're a guy, but you'll always be a guy. If that's the world you want to live in, that's fine.
It's funny to me because, you know, why is it that most of the trans lesbians used to be chauvinistic males?
And that continues, and it's like this, like whole, they're argumentative, and you talked about that a little while ago, that the trans women who identify as lesbian, who are actually straight, are the ones that have the most anger, the ones that always, they call me what's that word?
Misogynistic.
Yeah,
it's a word that originated in...
Yeah, and I'm like, I was born a female, I could say these things, how are you calling me misogynist? You know, and it's just like, they're the ones that fight the most. They're the ones that are angry. I mean, I'd be scared half the time because I think they're either going to come, you know, look for me and shoot me or something, you know, because that's the kind of thing most of them tend to do. They're angry.
Well, you know, so this again is the tension because, you know, lesbians are women who love women. We want, you know, emotional, sexual, physical, like, you know, relations with women. And then you have this very entitled group, you know, heterosexual men, and invariably this is anecdotally, but like in my experience, it's white heterosexual men who then are like, I'm a lesbian, so I'm gonna come in here and tell you how you lesbians do things. And like, we've actually been lesbians a whole long time, like over time. There's like a long lesbian culture history, like, you know, and, you know, here's this guy coming to tell us how to do it. And like, it's comical because like we're dykes. So we're just like, yeah, whatever, dude. So like, you know, like when it was like a smaller phenomena, like that was fine. But like it has taken over the GLBT movement. You know, you now have like the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, you know, which has packed its board with trans women, and you know their board is led by a trans woman, and is led by this, like, it's actually now transphobic to say that trans women are not female. And for lesbians, we're like, hold up, like,
I know, it's great. I even get offended because it's like, I was born a female and I was a lesbian. And so when I hear all this, I'm like, the lesbian female side of me, it's like, what the hell, you know?
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for standing up for your sisters, because we need it. Because no one is listening to us because we're women. So it's just like everyone's just like, shut the fuck up, you stupid fucking bitch, you fat dyke, you know? And like the misogyny that comes pouring out. And of course, it's all justified because they're women. Right? Exactly. So they're just like, you know, they're speaking their like justified rage. So it's really like a no-win situation for dykes. Like we are literally, you know, our backs against the wall, which is why, you know, myself and others are so aggressive, because this is a crisis. Like, I cannot tell you how many young women I have fielded telephone calls over the last 3 years, crying, weeping, sobbing, because they have dated trans women and they didn't want to, but they felt pressured to do so, or they were being pressured to do so. So this has real consequences. And, you know, women, given that women are like the oppressed class, given, you know, the fact that women are subjected to sexual violence perpetrated by males at like alarming rates, you're now putting, you know, women in the crosshairs of this agenda, where we're being demanded to provide, you know, access, not just to like women only space. So like, you know, you have attacks on women only space, like the Michigan Women's Music Festival, radical feminist conferences, but also our bodies. And that's rape culture. Like, there's no other way to describe this except what's happening is rape culture. So I don't consider, you know, the GLBT movement right now to be a civil rights movement. I consider it to be a men's rights movement, and I don't want any part of it. And I'm happy to like pot shot with my little slingshot as much as I can, you know, because, you know, the hope is, you know, that people will eventually wake up and say, hey, you know, it's wrong to tell lesbians that they should fuck women with penises, because women don't have penises, and lesbians don't like penis because we don't like men sexually. And it should be okay to say that. Like,
I mean, everybody's got their preference. I mean, that's,
well, yeah, and it should be okay. And like, okay, we're GLBT, like, just be a B. Like, you're bisexual. Like, what the fuck ever? Like, you know, just like leave the dykes alone. Leave the fucking dykes alone.
Amen on that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Many in the trans community have issues with not being accepted into women's only events. Can you clear up for us what this is all about to the best of your ability?
Yeah, well, so there is this sense that we have to all accept that trans women are women. And because trans women are women, you cannot establish a space that delineates women to exclude trans women. So I have been told by some trans women that women-only space would be okay if we called it cis women-only space. So this is forcing us, women, to buy into this ideology that is false and hollow and does not speak to our experience. So once again, and yet again, we are being asked to invalidate our experience and validate the experience of people who are part of the oppressor class, because trans women, once again, male. So the tension over women-only space is, you know, the people who create the women-only space that they want into tend to be dykes, or they tend to be radical feminists. So we have a very good sense of, one, you know, you're male, trans woman, sorry. And two, you know, a lot of us work with vulnerable populations of women. So, you know, you have radical feminists are responsible for creating domestic violence shelters for women fleeing abusive relationships. radical feminists are responsible for rape crisis shelters for women who've experienced sexual violence at the hands of men. So, we have a pretty keen, and I say the global we, not me specifically, because I've never done anything that important, but like those women have a very keen sense of the dynamics at play that lead women to want and crave women-only space. And trans women don't have that, and they don't have a respect for that history of sexual violence and the fact that women need space to heal and space to just be not concerned that they're going to be assaulted. And that is the value that trans women have. Trans women view it as a direct threat to their identity, when in fact it actually has nothing to do with them. And it would be such a better use of their time if they would go and create their own space. Because I guarantee you would not have women coming into their space and saying like, well, I demand access to yours. It wouldn't happen. Like, it just wouldn't happen.
It's crazy. It's all based on ego, and they're getting their feelings hurt. How dare you not see me as such and such? I'm a woman, so you're going to allow me in this space.
Ego.
Damn it, or else.
That's exactly right. A lot of this is just ego, and it's bullying. It's bullying behavior. And, you have these cases of like, trans women who've been misgendered at like stores and then have like, I'm going to sue you and all this shit. Like, as a gay person, like, how many times have you been misgendered? Like, I'm misgendered on pretty much a daily basis. Like, there's a lack of empathy for other people who aren't in this like queer bubble, and like, there's this one case of this trans woman in Texas who went to like a dollar store, and the clerk was like, you can't, pay with a check, sir. Like, honest mistake. And he's actually male. And the trans woman's like, how dare you? And got all angry. And I'm like, have a compassion for that person. That person is like a clerk in a store. They're making minimum wage. Like, what kind of a dick are you that you're like going to like ruin their day and threaten their job because they called you sir?
And that's what they do the most, is threatening, trying to get rid of your livelihood. Look at what happened with RuPaul and using the word tranny. They all try to get him fired. And it's like,
Exactly. Like, RuPaul invented tranny. So like,
I know.
Hello.
And this is another example of like gay culture. Like, like tranny is a gay word. Like, it's a gay culture word. And like, I recognize now, like, tranny has a lot of connotations with porn. And, I find that very disturbing, personally. But you have now these like heterosexual men like Parker Malloy, like, RuPaul is such a evil. And I'm like, shut the fuck up, Parker. Like, you came out as a woman like 5 minutes ago. Like, Ru's been doing this shit for how long? Shut up. Just shut the fuck up.
She's the loudest too. I mean, talk about keyboard warrior. She has written these articles that are like, really? What is wrong? I think she needs like mental evaluation or something, because
I think The Advocate and GLAAD and Huffington Post need to get the hell rid of that individual, because that person writes nothing but freaking
Parker is exactly like what they're looking for. Like, Parker, like, is a good writer. Parker, conventionally attractive as a man and as a woman. Like, so like, I'm like, great. So like, Parker, you're going to write another piece about how women are oppressing you because we have vaginas, how oppressive, and you can't go to Michigan, how sad for you, and I actually, I had some correspondence with Parker like months ago, and, Parker had written something about Brandon Tina, which is something, I actually was an adult for and a dyke for, and was like an event that had, significance like in my political development, like, because Brandon Tina, identified, as a man, but Brandon Tina was like sexually assaulted and murdered because Brandon Tina is female. Like, that's what happened. And like, that has consequences. And trying to explain to Parker, I was like, Parker, when that happened, you were a 4-year-old boy. Like, do you have any sense of like maybe respect for history, and like, no, there's zero respect, and there's this just automatic demand that we as lesbians are supposed to just be like, oh, we were waiting for you to show up. Now that you're here, what can we do?
Complete.
Like, we actually have this like vast deep, rich culture that you will never be a part of because you're not a woman. And I'm sorry that you're not a part of that because it's pretty fucking awesome, but build your own fucking culture.
Exactly, and half of these keyboard hacktivists that sit behind the keyboard, okay, 90% of them, well, I'd say maybe 85%, probably have never really stepped outside of their door, outside of the LGBT community as, let's say, Parker. They step out as Bob. You know, that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, I'm a trans, I want to be seen as a woman, yet I live as a woman on the computer, but out in real life, I don't grocery shop as a woman. I grocery shop as a dude.
Yeah, and they're the loudest.
And they're the ones that are out there causing all the controversy, along with some of the ones out in the mainstream media that are sitting there that are, you know, doing the same thing.
I don't know about that, but I do know that the vast majority of trans people that I know are just living their lives. Like, they just want to live their lives. They treat people with respect. They expect to be treated with respect, and they get respect because they are respectful. And, like, you know, in Baltimore, I've lived in Baltimore for, you know, almost 20 years, and, like, we have like a network of people that, like, we care about one another, and, like, when things come up, we do for each other. And, you know, whether you're transgender or gay or a lesbian, like, doesn't matter so much as the, like, good intent that you bring to it. And, you know, I do blame the internet for a lot of this hostility, because it really enables people who have no connection, no investment, to just, like, mouth off and become important, you know, in this, like, fake realm. But the hard work of, like, the, you know, day-to-day reality, they're not doing it, you know, and they're really just creating tension for those of us who are, you know, actually concerned about the problems in our community. And, like, there are significant, like, in Baltimore City, like, in the last 41 days or 45 days, there's been 2 murders of African-American trans women. And there's been some attempts to politicize this nationally and to, you know, as, like, all trans women are vulnerable. That's bullshit. The trans women who are vulnerable in our community are trans women of color, who have engaged in sex work. And, like, if we can't have honest conversations about that, how are we going to solve the problem? Like, how are we going to solve the problem? And, you know, like, let's be honest, like, the perpetrators of these murders, I'm going to go out on a limb, they're men. You know, so, like,
Right.
We need to be able to have honest discussions about that in our community, and, like, how we can address that. And, you know, all of this bullshit static of, you know, Parker Malloy is just as likely to get murdered as, you know, Mia Henderson was. That's bullshit.
Exactly.
It's just, it's not true. And it's also racist. Like, there's a lot of
Big
racism
time.
in the trans movement, where you have, like, these white heterosexual males who now identify as lesbians dictating the agenda, and, like, we're all supposed to go and be like, oh yeah, like, that sounds like a good plan. And, like, it's like, no, but actually, like, communities of color aren't being addressed, and that's specifically true in Baltimore City. So
Exactly.
anyway, so that's a long way of saying is we have a lot of work to do.
Exactly. And, you know, one thing before you go into the next question, I'm losing my earpiece here. The fact that you touched on a very important subject, which was the case that, you know, the violence against trans women, I would say a good portion of the time is brought on because they're putting themselves in their own vicarious situations. They're trying to deceive, you know, to affirm their gender identity. And when you do something like that, you're now putting somebody else's sexual orientation into question, or sexuality into question. And that's gonna piss somebody off way more than just being up front and saying, hey, listen, I'm a chick with a dick, or I'm a tranny. You know what I mean? FTMs don't deal with that as much because they're not out there putting themselves in that vicarious situation.
Right. Well, I hear what you're saying, and I would frame it as follows. The homophobia that exists in our culture still is significant. So, you know, with all these strides that, you know, and I'm going to talk about gay men for a minute, like, you know, gay men, especially gay white men, like, the one thing that was holding them back from being equal is the fact that they suck cock. Okay. So, like, we need to normalize, like, men sucking cock. in order for gay white men to be equal. Fine, whatever. Like, they should be equal. We should all be equal, blah, blah, blah. So we're not there yet. Like, we still aren't there. Like, there's this very deep cultural resistance to, like, what being a man means. And this has negative consequences predominantly for women, but it does have negative consequences for gay men as well. So I would never blame a trans woman who has been murdered by a violent homophobic man for her murder. Like, it's not her fault at all. Like, the fault rests with this, like, hypermasculine male socialization that leads a man to, you know, be willing to dehumanize the trans woman and kill her. Now, that being said, and I would also say this about women in certain circumstances, you're right. Like there are certain risks knowing that males, you know, are violent, misogynistic homophobes that will kill you. So, like, part of the job of, you know, GLBT activism, in my view, is to be able to have those conversations honestly and be like, listen, honey, like, I know you feel like a woman, but, like, if you do that, like, this homophobic asshole might kill you, you know? Right. But these are conversations that are not, you know, for the internet. This is like the real hard work of actual organizing. And I can tell you that in Baltimore City, that's happening. And, you know, I would also argue that in a lot of these cases, the men knew that the woman that they were engaging with sexually was biologically male. And then there's some reaction afterwards where they have some shame. And again, that is not the fault of the victim of the crime. The fault always is with the perpetrator. So, but we can't have honest conversations around this because, you know, everyone will be accused of, you know, all sorts of shit.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's so sad.
Well, then I just gotta say, I was laughing because of the cat's tail. The
Yeah,
cat's
the
tail
cat-
was
This
going
is my
all over the
cat.
place.
This is my cat. His name is George.
Oh, hi, George.
The reason we can't have these conversations is because people wear their feelings on their sleeves, and everything is based on ego. If we just put our ego aside and agree to disagree and agree to be able to have a conversation that's going to help heal the problems that we're facing. Right now, all we're doing is adding fire to the flame, or adding
Fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I'm Cuban,
Yeah.
so I make up my own.
But
it's
Spanglish.
Spanglish, yeah, and it's crazy because we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to create more enemies. There's going to be more hate crime towards us because people are starting to really dislike the trans community as of late.
There's different levels to it. Like, you know, so you have like the vicious, like lethal violence that's experienced by trans women of color. And then you have these instances where women have assaulted trans women. And there's been a couple of instances of that. Like there's the case of the Hercules High School case. In Baltimore, obviously, we had Chrissy Pola's case. There was a case in D.C. at a pizza joint. There's a case in Queens at a diner. And that's a different character of incident. And, you know, I've been watching that with great curiosity because in those cases, the assailants against the trans women have been women of color. And so I find that interesting. And if you read the accounts of what happened, and in the pizza case in DC, there's actually video, what you see is the trans woman acting really disrespectfully to the women who then ended up punching him in the face. So that says something about respect. And it says something about, like, you know, how is we as like queer culture, like, and, you know, you're a trans woman in queer culture and interacting in the larger world, like, maybe you need to learn how to de-escalate a situation. Because in all of these situations, in my observation, there was an antagonism that occurred. And, like, I'm familiar with this, like, having been accosted at the Dyke March in 2011 with this, like, you know, this, like, I need to tell you how it is. And, like, as a woman and also, you know, an older woman, like, I know how to de-escalate to protect myself. But, you know, if I was in my 20s and, like, some guy's in my face telling me he's a woman, like, I might slap him too. I'd be like, you're in my space. Get out of my space. I don't think that's a hate crime.
No, and you brought on a very good point that a lot of the videos that we've watched about saying how trans women were attacked, viciously attacked, this, that, the other. It's usually the trans woman that is showing male aggression, and and that male aggression is what's getting their asses kicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's there was the video that had circulated a couple weeks ago from in front of the skateboard shop in Atlanta, where
Yes, we saw that.
like clearly was like antagonizing and could have de-escalated, could simply have walked away. So not again. The perpetrator is always at fault, but like we need to start talking about like what can we do to protect ourselves, like as people, and every single person that has threatened me that I've then published their name, has then accused me of like you're stalking me and you're cyberbullying me. I'm like, you need to learn not to threaten to rape people.
Yeah.
Okay, like you need to learn that women don't exist for you to threaten. Like we don't. So the sooner you learn that, the sooner we can all move forward and maybe talk about something more interesting.
Exactly. And my question is, why in the fuck you want to be a woman? Okay, pardon my French, but you want to be a woman and yet you're going to threaten a woman with rape. That's one of the most degrading things for a woman to ever go through, and I know that by being raised by 3 women. And that can totally ruin a woman's life forever. And why would you, as wanting to be a woman, threaten that to another woman? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, yeah, and what it also demonstrates is, a lack of sensitivity, the fact that pretty much I assume every woman that I come across has been assaulted in some manner, and varying degrees, like groped, ass grabbed, whatever it is, up to rape and significant systemic abuse. And having empathy and compassion for women, I think, would do the trans woman community a world of good. They're just not there. Like, they just want women to take our pain and the violent things that have happened to us and just put it to the side and be like, oh, you're right, none of that matters, because let's talk about how you feel. And that's not reality based. It's not good for women, and it won't result in healing for women. And so that's why myself and many of us are adamant about preserving the right of women to establish a boundary. And that boundary could be, a personal boundary, like I'm a lesbian, I don't engage sexually with male-bodied people. It could be, I'm going to have a conference and we're going to talk about things at this conference that we don't want men to hear. Or it could be establishing a domestic violence or rape crisis shelter. If trans women could develop empathy and acknowledge that women are not, in fact, privileged over them, because we're not, right, we might be able to move forward. But, they're still peddling this fiction of, cisgender oppressors, when what they really should be talking about is, male supremacy. Like, it's male supremacy. And, if transgender women are honest about wanting to opt out of male supremacy, I suggest they start listening to women.
And like you said,
Exactly.
They'll never be able to understand. I mean, I was sexually molested by a so-called real good friend of our family who I looked upon as a grandfather when I was 8 years old. When I started wanting to date, I was 10 or 11 or had little boyfriends, whatever, again, that try to push themselves on me. All of a sudden, I just became very fearful of men. I just wanted nothing to do with that organ. And I was a virgin till I was with Jessica, because I never trusted anyone to even, I didn't even like women putting anything in there. It was like, that was like, whoa, out of touch. And
you have
very
trauma.
few people
Like,
can understand
this is
that
trauma.
pain. Very few people could understand that pain and that fear and that, and to sit there and have a trans woman say, well, I know how a woman feels. I've thought like a woman all my life, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, you can't. We even have arguments because of that. Because a lot of times you don't see me as a woman, you see me as a dude. It's like,
bullshit.
well, you know,
Wait a
it's
minute.
like,
Wait a minute.
Well, all
minute.
couples,
Okay,
all
that's
couples
a whole
fight.
nother topic for another whatever. But no, that's not true.
so,
And you know it. I'm
but-
not
but
afraid
you
to get
don't-
my hands dirty.
Oh, no, I
do
understand that,
things
but
that
you don't.
males would
Sometimes
do.
you don't see the things that I feel, and it's. I mean, it's how you think, but it's. Okay, never mind. Let's
Anyway, yeah.
Let me go to the next question. Gender is fluid, and many have fought to break down that stereotype. Tell us how you feel about the statement.
So the concept of gender fluidity is garbage. Gender isn't fluid. Gender is a hierarchy that subordinates women. So women are at the bottom, and then men stand on top, and they're like, I'm walking all over you. And it's gender is the tool that programs women and programs men to accept these roles. So no, gender's not fluid. What they're talking about is fashion. What they're talking about is personality. And they've substituted these very shallow concepts for, a political analysis. So, I hear people say gender is fluid. I'm like, oh my God, I remember in the 80s when people wore pastels and there was like big shoulder pads. Like, I'm like, I will get concerned if we start seeing more legislation to protect gender fluid people, which we're not entirely there yet. There's one local law, I think it was in Montana, where they were pushing something like that. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But yeah, gender fluid is not something that I take. I pretty much stop listening to people when they say shit like that.
I agree, because there is a lot of people. I don't think there's really such a thing as a straight person, because everybody's always desired or attempted to or has stepped into that realm of curiosity.
I mean, with sexuality, like, this fits into the whole idea of like, you're born that way, like you're born that way gay or you're born that way straight. I don't believe that at all. I mean, we are socialized in this culture to have, specific views, beliefs, and values from a very early age. And because they are so deeply ingrained and internalized, we then believe that they're natural. But in fact, they're not natural. Like, there's no like gay part of my brain, or there's no part of my brain that makes me more masculine than my special lady friend, like all of this is like socialization. So yeah, the whole idea of like, innate sexual orientation, it doesn't matter, because once again, there's great power for women in saying, you know what, I choose to be with women because women are fucking awesome. So like, I don't need to be born that way to be a lesbian. And this is also very controversial to say in our community, because it means that, well, you're not actually gay because you're rejecting like the dominant view in our community of born that way. Born that way doesn't benefit women. It benefits men. It benefits gay men who want an excuse for engaging in behavior that's deemed to be socially undesirable or deviant, where it would be so much more empowering to be like, you know what? I love being a deviant. I love it. Like,
I love being a rebel.
Video?
Yeah, like you're a guy who like likes to have sex with, men. Good for you. Have a nice time.
Absolutely.
Here's a video that we also went ahead and took from your blog. And I think the video kind of speaks for itself. The name, I think it's Meryl. And we're looking at individuals that are pretty much have a lot of mental issues besides having gender dysphoria. And they're not being, the gender specialists are not looking at these individuals. So we want to go ahead and share this quick video.
Okay.
I'm apparently the most hated person on the internet because I noticed that people like this guy is not actually a woman. So this is a man named Ryan Fortney. He lives in Pennsylvania, and he is someone who identifies as a woman. I also think he probably suffers from mental health issues. So actually, after having watched this video, I feel greater compassion for him because his life must not be easy. But I also think it's important to be reality-based and to affirm the right of women to interact with this person and to know he is actually a man. And I also think it's important for liberal feminists to realize that these are the types of men that seek access to women's only space. And I want you to think about that, because you can pretend all you like on the internet that this is a woman, but he's clearly not a woman, he's clearly a man.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about things that I fucking hate. First of all, hey, I'm totally gangsta.
That seems racist also.
Today we're going to talk about things that make me mad.
I want to play a game. You have 30 seconds to chop off your testicles. Live or die. Make your choice.
Alright, so for my first little web episode, we're going to talk about smoking. It's bad. Okay?
The zombies are here. There's not much left to do. Besides, kill them.
So just take a look at the background environment. This is in a room, a bed's unmade, it looks a little disheveled. This to me suggests that this person suffers from mental health issues, has some disconnect from reality, and this is the type of person who is driving online transgender activism, and is gaining traction because of the mainstream GLBT movement's belief in gender. I think we need to actually be realistic about the mental health implications of simply forfeiting the GLBT movement to folks like this, because I'm not interested in being in space with this person. This person is frightening.
Okay, so I'm Meryl, as Fortney, the independent author. I write books. Hello. What's up? You want some action, Rebecca?
I mean, I understand that transgender people like Ryan want affirmation and can only get it on the internet. Clearly, they're not getting it in real life, because clearly in reality, the people who interact with Ryan on a day-to-day basis know he's male. And they probably do their best to avoid him because he's also frightening. That's what I typically do when I interact with someone I find frightening. I avoid them. I don't want to interact with them.
And it's really funny because we've seen other videos from other trans females who also have this, like, we saw this one who was like into making bombs and destroying things, and I'm like, oh, that's scary. That's really, really scary.
It's like, I wouldn't want to be in the same place with that person either.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
Yeah.
I think I was afraid of something like that under my bed as a kid. I mean,
Yeah, and this is, this is the conflict, is we're being confronted with folks like this and expected to validate, affirm, support, and that dude is a violent misogynist. Like, he has made he forged a comment for me that said, like, I wanted all trans women dead, which is false, and like demonstrably false. And two, he's like, he uses his Twitter to tweet, like, if he wishes he could have time with me because he could really give me some PTSD. Like, he's a violent person. And I am more than happy to publicize the things that he and others says in order to make the point that women would like space away from violent people like that.
exactly. Well, see, the whole trans movement, like you were saying back in the day, in the 90s, there was no angry militia movement.
I miss the 90s. I miss the 90s.
Yes, I miss the 80s more than the 90s, but, I do miss the 90s as well.
You're not old enough to remember the 80s.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm 40.
And I'm 50.
You're just a baby.
I feel like an old fart.
Aw. Mark, you're 50?
I'm 50.
Uh-huh.
I just turned June 30th, 50.
Oh, happy birthday. Yeah.
Cancer.
Cancer. I was like thinking cancer. Yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm an Aries, fire and water.
Oh,
Yeah,
look
one
at
more
you.
question. Yeah, that dangerous combination.
Yeah.
Anyway, many think you are transphobic. We believe many in our community are the ones that are actually transphobic. Can you tell us how you feel about trans people in general?
I have
A few thoughts about that, as you might imagine. My feelings about this are split. Trans men, I have a different feeling about than trans women, and here's why. You know, coming out as a lesbian and being active in the community, I have had many lesbian friends who, you know, decided that they wanted to live and identify as male, and that's painful. Like, this is a painful topic for me personally. So my feelings about trans men will always be different for that reason, and you know, I will always have a certain love and respect for trans men, even when they're like, you know, adapting, you know, misogynistic mannerisms. And I've had fights with like my trans man friends who I'm not friends with anymore, who I knew as dykes, who like would pull, well, you're acting like a uppity bitch. I'm like, we were in the Lesbian Avengers together. Are you really going to talk to me like that? Like, so yeah. Like, that's one feeling, which I don't talk about that a lot publicly because that's very personal and it makes me sad. Like, I have sad feelings about that. Trans women, as you might imagine, I also have feelings about. And again, I have more empathy for trans women who were socialized as gay men or like were in queer community from a young age than I do for late transitioning heterosexual men. The late transitioning heterosexual men, I don't really think a whole lot favorably about them. I think they've uniformly demonstrated that they continue to uphold the values of male supremacy that they had when they were living as heterosexual men. And I reject that. Now, that's like on a macro level. Individuals, you know, I've met plenty of like late transitioning heterosexual men who now identify as lesbians who aren't assholes. And they should speak out more because they're getting a bad reputation.
Exactly.
Well, we want to thank you so much for your time. I mean, the show's normally an hour and it's gone on and on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's a great
topic, and it's something that's healing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for the willingness to have the conversation.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's something that my sister is a lesbian. I was a lesbian. I know that a lot of my ex-lesbian friends resented me, and it's something like, it breaks my heart because it's like, we're all people and we're trying to live our lives. And I think loving one another and understanding one another is the key. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes I wonder if I should have done what I did, especially as I evolved through my transition. I think totally different than what I did when I first started. I think that we're being guided by a lot of programming. I think there's this
power of suggestion.
And sometimes we forget that, you know, it's not about what we present out here. It's about what we have inside our hearts. And spirits are genderless. They have both a male and a female side. And I think part of that yin and yang and that balance is what the universe is trying to speak to us.
Well, I definitely agree that our community has a compassion deficit. And, you know, I'd like to think, you know, that conversations can continue where we can develop more compassion and empathy for one another. So again, thank you for your willingness to have that kind of a conversation.
Thank you. And I admire your strength and your tenacity. You're really a good person. And
thank you.
And it rubs me the wrong way when people talk bad, you know, about you, because it's like, you don't know her. How dare you come up? Oh, she's done this, that, and the other. It's like,
it's
why?
About bandwagon jumping.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like crazy.
It's like, okay, let's become an angry mob and mob up against one person, and you know, nobody takes the time to look in and see what the person is really all about, but they want to jump on the bandwagon. On the bandwagon, shut up. On the bandwagon and start bashing and brutalizing other people.
Which is wrong.
You know, learn about the person before you make your own decision. Yeah. Be strong enough to make your own decision and be different.
Well, I admire you for that, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Keep in touch. Care. So we're going to take a quick break to announce our other sponsor.
And we'll be right back with the transition video of the week.
So
stay tuned.
Dr. Vardan Mardirosyan is a facial feminization surgeon in Jupiter, Florida. He did a fellowship in facial plastic and reconstructive surgery with one of the fathers of facial feminization surgery. He has also completed an extensive training in FFS for the past 6 years, working in close contact with his mentor. Dr. Mardirosyan performs surgeries in his office in a fully licensed operating room or in the local hospital with highly trained and reliable staff. Give him a call today at 561-624-0900. That's 561-624-0900. Dr. Mardirosyan is highly qualified and understands our needs. We try to kill who we once were and realize this is impossible. Creating anew, bringing balance within, our true alignment is what truly is.
I know we feel the old can't be, but we are one in reality. The healing comes when we understand that our journey is part of the plan.
And now, for the transition video of the week with Cojito Ergo Sum.